Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, health officials say it's the start of the end of the COVID-19 pandemic as the UK authorises Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use. The UK has become the first country in the world to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for widespread use. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the NHS stands ready to begin immunisations next week for people in high-priority groups.
The news of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine approval came on the same day England emerged from a month-long coronavirus lockdown, with London residents giving a cautious welcome.
I think that it could help us to protect ourselves from getting more damage for our lives and economy. I believe in this.
A little bit reserved about it, I think, actually. Yeah. I don't know, obviously lots of drugs come out quite quickly, but we usually have quite a few years to test them before we give them to the main public, so I'm not sure about it.
The Pfizer-BioNTech jab is the fastest vaccine to go from concept to reality, taking only 10 months to follow the same steps that normally span 10 years. The UK has already ordered 40 million doses, enough to vaccinate 20 million people. The first 800,000 doses will be available in the UK from next week.
The public can be absolutely confident that every rigorous check has been done to reach the judgment that we reached, that the benefits far outweigh any risk, that the safety of the vaccine has been scrutinised independently by our Commission on Human Medicines and no stone has been left unturned. So absolute confidence in the safety, effectiveness and quality of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. In terms of further products, vaccines for COVID-19 that are coming through, there are two, you'll be aware, for which we have further rolling reviews ongoing, and those will be conducted to the absolute scientific standards that the public would expect.
Britain's vaccine committee decides which priority groups get the jab first. Elderly people in care homes and care home staff are top of the priority list, followed by over 80s and health and care staff.
The JCVI's advice is aimed at maximising benefit from vaccines, and therefore it's aimed at the most vulnerable people, which are people in care homes. Whether or not the vaccine itself can be delivered to care homes is obviously an important point, and there will be some flexibility in terms of operational constraints. The JCVI's advice is that every effort should be made to supply vaccine and offer vaccinations to care home residents. Whether or not that is actually doable is dependent on deployment and implementation.
Pfizer says Britain's emergency use authorization is a historic moment in the fight against the virus. Vaccines are seen as the best chance to get the world back to normal. Pfizer now believes more approvals from other regulators are on their way. It has applied for clearance from the US and the EU, with decisions expected later this month.
In another major step forward in combating the coronavirus, pharmaceutical company Moderna has applied for US and EU emergency authorization for its COVID-19 vaccine. It comes after the company said full results from a late-stage study showed it was 94.1% effective with no serious safety concerns.
Moderna has filed for US and European emergency regulatory approval of its coronavirus vaccine so that it can be recommended for widespread use. Regulators will look at trial data for the mRNA vaccine and decide if it is safe and effective enough to recommend for rollout. Clinical studies show the jab is more than 94% effective at protecting people from becoming ill with COVID-19. Moderna also reported that its vaccine efficacy rate was consistent across age, race, ethnicity, gender demographics, as well as having a 100% success rate in preventing severe cases of a disease that has killed nearly 1.5 million people worldwide. Moderna says if its vaccine is approved, injections for Americans could begin as early as December 21st.
We have worked very closely with Operation Warp Speed. And as we said, we should have up to 20 million doses by the end of the year. So as soon as we get approval, General Perna and his teams are going to get hold of a vaccine we have and start shipping it in the country. His goal is to vaccinate Americans within 24 hours from approval.
The company says it's also working to make it readily available for low-income countries.
We want to make sure the vaccine is available around the world. We have already made a proposal to COVAX with a tiered pricing where the pricing will be lower for, let's say, low-income country. What we want is that this premium vaccine is used especially for healthcare workers, for the elderly, for people with high risk. And this is why we're having those discussions with COVAX. I hope they can be finalized soon so that we can provide the vaccine not only in the high-income country, but also mid-income and low-income countries.
Moderna hopes to gain UK approval soon, now that it has trial data from 30,000 volunteers, including high-risk groups like the elderly, that suggests it works. More than 70 coronavirus vaccines are being developed around the world, including 11 that, like Pfizer's and Moderna's vaccines, are in large-scale trials to gauge effectiveness.
For the United States, authorities are already thinking of the huge challenge of getting the vaccine physically to all of the more than 330 million people living in the U.S. Health experts in Florida say they are ready for the challenge and already have a plan.
A Florida healthcare provider says it is prepared to distribute a coronavirus vaccine as soon as it becomes available. Jackson Health System, which serves Miami-Dade County, says it will be one of the first networks to receive the Pfizer Incorporated vaccine when it is approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
So we are very fortunate at the Jackson Health System. We are expecting the COVID-19 vaccine. We have the negative 80 refrigeration freezer needed to store the vaccine. We are expecting the vaccine in mid-December. So we are ready to make sure that we are deploying the vaccine to our employees. For those that choose to get vaccinated, we have a deployment plan for first high-risk employees and then for all employees that are interested.
Pfizer's vaccine candidate uses synthetic messenger RNA to activate the immune system against the virus and needs to be kept at -70 degrees Celsius or below. Jackson Health System staff showed off the cold storage freezers they have put in place to store the vaccine. Miami-Dade has been particularly hard hit by COVID-19. As of Monday, November 30, the county had 230,000 reported infections with nearly 4,000 deaths.
Jackson is a very large health system in Miami-Dade County. We're also a county hospital able to serve the patients of Miami-Dade. So we were selected because of the number of cases we have had of COVID-19 and for our ability to get a large number of vaccine out to quite a few employees and eventually to the patients of our community. So with the vaccine, we are hoping the initial data looks very promising, showing over 90% for the 2 first vaccines that are expected out. So with this ability for us to vaccinate and have protection against COVID-19, it would allow us to start looking forward. So as healthcare professionals, we understand the need for the science behind this vaccine, and we'll be able to be the example for the community, start vaccinating ourselves and encouraging others to do the same.
Americans who have endured 8 months of restrictions, lockdowns, and business closures in the face of the pandemic are pinning their candidates developed by drug companies Pfizer and Moderna. Final trial results for the Pfizer showed it had a 95% success rate and no serious side effects. Frontline healthcare workers, residents of nursing homes, and long-term care facilities and high-risk members of the public will be prioritized in the early phases of the nationwide vaccination plan.
While more vaccines are seeking approval around the world, many more could be ready for rapid production and distribution anytime this month. In cold storage warehouses in Amsterdam, airport workers are gearing up for a surge next year in COVID-19 vaccine cargoes that will need to be flown around the world at ultra-low temperatures.
With drug makers racing to produce coronavirus vaccines, authorities face a challenge in how to transport them around the world en masse once they are ready. And they'll have to do it while keeping them at ultra-low temperatures. Here at a large cold storage warehouse at Amsterdam's airport, KLM workers are getting ready for a surge in vaccine cargoes next year. Schiphol Airport is a major hub for medical products, and it has already handled some of the vaccines being used in trials.
The bigger containers can carry up to 30,000 doses of the vaccine. Well, we know that we're going to have to transport a lot of the vaccine, so we do expect a large increase there, but we have space, as you can see.
The airport is the second biggest hub for pharmaceutical products in Europe. It's expected to be both a staging ground for vaccines from India, Italy or the United States, and a departure point for vaccines made in Europe.
What we expect, the volumes for the vaccines come on top of the regular volumes. However, we do expect that they come gradually. So the first ones will probably come in December, January, and from there on new vaccines will be approved. The additional capacity that is needed for that is something that we're planning for. So we do expect to be able to handle the additional volumes needed for vaccine transportation.
The Pfizer vaccine will have to be transported at -80°C in small cool boxes holding about 5,000 doses, which must be kept packed in dry ice until shortly before use.
Speaking of transportation, Sweden's capital has enlisted the help of 1,000 corona cabbies to move COVID-19 tests from homes to labs around the city. Taxi drivers have been hit hard financially by the pandemic and are pleased to be supporting the testing efforts.
Swedish taxi driver Lance Goran Goransson has been picking up some unusual fares over recent months, working as one of 1,000 corona cabbies around Stockholm. Instead of taking passengers where they want to go in the city, he's been collecting and delivering COVID-19 test swabs between homes and laboratory collection points in the Swedish capital.
I've been driving for 20 years and it's a very good variation in the job, and meeting people is a nice part of the job. So I can talk to them, or if they want to talk, of course. Some people want to work and be quiet, so sometimes it's the same as driving package, but most of the time it's very good to meet people. I feel very good about doing this because the customers that we drive the test to are very happy that they don't need to go anywhere, and they can get it home and can stay home all the time.
He admits it has taken some time to adapt.
I think the approach Sweden had been good because of if we had the lockdown, our economy had been suffering much more, and it's hard for the moment, but it's not that hard. So I think this is a very good way to handle the pandemic. Yes, I'm nervous, but I think it's more risky to go to the store and buy groceries or take the tunnelbana, public transport. So I think this is a safe way to do your work.
Since the pandemic began, private hire taxi firms have home delivered and collected more than 250,000 tests, effectively putting cab drivers behind the wheel of Stockholm's testing regime. Usually, people get their results within 24 hours of a visit from a corona cabbie whom they may not even see, as the pickup aims to avoid close contacts. Sweden drew attention early on in the coronavirus crisis for its decision not to impose lockdown measures, but it has since brought in new rules to slow the spread. It has thrown struggling cabbies a financial lifeline during the pandemic, allowing drivers to stay afloat until the time when people, rather than swabs, become their main passengers once again.
When we return in just a moment, business owners are not pleased with COVID-19 restrictions ahead of the Christmas holidays. Stay with us. Despite the government easing France's national COVID-19 lockdown over the weekend, not everyone is happy. Hundreds of restaurant, hotel and events industry workers took to the streets this week with one strong message: let us work.
France allowed the reopening of non-essential shops on Saturday, November the 28th, and is setting sights on the December 15 reopening of museums, cinemas and other cultural sites if the number of new COVID-19 infections continue to drop. However, the government says restaurants, bars, nightclubs and gyms will not be able to resume operations before January the 20th, sparking ire and criticisms among the hospitality industry.
We understand that the health aspect is essential, but the economy is essential too. And tomorrow we will die if nothing is done, and if everything is done only for the sake of health. So we need to reopen. It's not the financial aid that motivates us, but the spirit of working. We need to work.
Events Industry Union representative says the group's members have seen whooping drops in their revenues, with some falling by up to 90%. All our members have had their earnings fall by 70, 80, 90%. And the future in 2021 is as dark as in 2020. All the finances of our businesses are depleted. Our businesses and our members are in agony. And the government is not hearing us out. The hospitality and dining sector has been especially battered by France's 2 lockdown periods this year. January 20 slated reopening date for restaurants is already too late, and on January 20, will we really be open? They tell us that the first sites of infection are family gatherings and they are being allowed. The Prime Minister says that maybe we'll reopen on January 20 if the epidemic hasn't flared up again. I myself don't believe it's going to be for January 20. It's today that we want to reopen. According to a National Union of the Hospitality Industry forecast in October, the sector, which represents nearly 1 million workers and a total revenue flow of 84 billion euros, is expected to shrink by 15%, 30% in the Paris region by year end.
Business owners in Portugal have taken a rather drastic step to convey their displeasure with COVID-19 restrictions. They've gone on hunger strike.
On Tuesday, December the 1st, restaurants and nightclub owners in Lisbon were on the 5th day of a hunger strike outside the Portuguese parliament in protest against coronavirus restrictions that are crippling their sector. We need support for lost revenues, support to maintain us with our head above water, and that they help us for the future when we reopen. Our sector has no work. It's been 9 months without work. We've invested everything we have to hold on until now. Staying in tents and living off water, tea and coffee donated by their supporters, these restaurant, bar and club owners said they will not eat until they are met by the Prime Minister and the Economy Minister. Bars and nightclubs have been closed since March, and while restaurants were allowed to reopen in May, a curfew and weekend lockdown in place across most of the country since November the 8th has angered restaurateurs who say many of their businesses will not survive the year. This season will be a time of extremely high income. Many businesses depend on this to survive. It's incredibly important that next weekend we return to normal opening hours. An online petition by the movement behind the strike has gathered nearly 37,000 signatures so far. In compensation for weekend lockdowns, the government offered restaurants 20% of their average revenue between January and October as compensation. But owners say this is nowhere near enough.
The problem for us is how we can support a company that has no money, that doesn't win any money, and has to pay taxes, has to pay the light, the water.
According to government data, the number of people registered as unemployed jumped 34.5% in October from last year's figures, with around 72% of the newly unemployed working in restaurants or retail.
Let's shift focus away from the COVID-19 pandemic now to another health matter. This week, South Africa joined the world to mark World AIDS Day with special attention to youth, women and children who suffer violations in the country. Deputy President David Mabuza, who is the chairman of the South African National AIDS Council, challenged young HIV-positive people with whom he interacted with in Soweto to break the stigma surrounding the disease. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, has the story.
Ahead of the main National AIDS Day event, also in Soweto, South Africa's Deputy President David Mabuza had an interactive session with a group of young men and women living with HIV. Some shared how they became HIV positive and the sometimes difficult journeys so far.
Thank you very much for exposing all these things that are a problem to yourself. You have made us wise as government. We are here today because of the many challenges that are facing our people. And we've developed a number of strategies, a number of ways to respond to these challenges. But the journey, like I said, is still long.
32 years since the first World AIDS Day was marked, South Africa still has nearly 8 million people living with the virus, about a fifth of the global HIV population. The nation, however, has the world's largest ARV treatment program, and people have pushed back the setbacks of the Thabo Mbeki denialist years and are living longer. However, according to the UNAIDS, in 2018, 240,000 new infections were recorded in South Africa, while 71,000 people died of AIDS-related illnesses. Now there's COVID-19, and some of the HIV/AIDS activists have been worried about a loss of attention to HIV.
My challenge is that we've made a really blunder when how as a country we responded to COVID-19. Our response was more based on COVID, not integrating COVID and HIV.
In actual fact, we have reached a stage where we have to reflect very seriously, because otherwise all the gains that we have made, we have lost ground, or the gains on the number of people that we put on treatment. We have particularly lost the ground on the number of people who are having their viral load tests done, so that we see that they are virally suppressed.
South Africa is said to be making good progress towards the UNAIDS 90-90-90 targets with regard to testing and viral suppression. But Deputy President Mabuza, who chairs the National AIDS Council, also admits that the road ahead is still a long one. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Finally, on the program, in the Rotondo household in Argentina, the spirit of Diego Maradona has a living tribute. Twin 9-year-old girls, Mara and Donna, named after the soccer legend who died last week.
They're carrying the Maradona name into the next generation, but not as relatives of the soccer star. Argentinian twins Mara and Donna were given their first names as a tribute to the late World Cup winner. For Dad, Walter Rotundo, the naming of the twins was never in doubt. He himself has a tattoo of Maradona on his back. Walter says the decision over the names went back to the 1990 World Cup, when he saw Maradona cry inconsolably after losing the final 1-0 to West Germany. Mara, older than her sister by a minute, says she loved her name and the story behind it.
It seems very beautiful for me to have this name, and what I like the most about this name is knowing why he called me that. I feel like this name is wonderful.
And Donna says the soccer star's death had come as a shock.
I can't believe he's dead. He was a very good person.
The diminutive playmaker, one of the world's best ever, who led Argentina to World Cup glory, inspired avid support through his magic on the pitch and his charismatic nature off it. Maradona died of heart failure on November 25th and was laid to rest on the 26th amid huge fanfare and high emotion.
And that's the program today. As always, remember that you can catch up with all our top stories on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.